You're about to see a former advisor to Nigel Farage come up with absolute nonsense and arguably score an own goal against Reform's biggest policy. But I'll tell you about that afterwards.
Do you think that your efforts to become a bigger party, to become a party which is even more mainstream than it has become, do you think that those efforts will be much helped by the comments of Sarah Pochin, who has, on a different network, said that it drives me mad when I see adverts full of black people, full of Asian people, and I feel that your average white person or average white family is not represented anymore? This was in response to a call to question, but those are her words. Do you think that it aids your efforts to broaden your appeal?
There's no doubt that Sarah could have couched her phrases more convivially. I'm not angry, I think she said, which makes her angry or something. I'm not angry, but I do, when I see these adverts, I do groan inwardly. When you have but we're talking not about governmental stuff. You're talking, I think the caller was asking her to promise the government a reform government would do something about it. Well, of course the government can't do something about it. It's an advertising industry thing. The advertising industry has a vision of the country that is very different than the country as it is. It presents a United Kingdom that is the one that the advertising industry would like to see, rather than how we are. Thus,
what a multi-ethnic country, which is just a matter of fact. In fact, you're always complaining about how, like lots of people on Twitter on that sort of thing, are always complaining about how multi-ethnic it's become.
Come on, we're talking about a tiny proportion of the population. I think it's 4% that is black, and upwards of 50% of adverts with black people in. So I am saying that they are trying to.
Does that bother you? Why does it bother you? Why does it bother you?
Did I say it bothered me?
Well, why does it bothers her? Why does it bother her?
As I say, but I think this is something that a lot of people up and down the country watch these adverts and go, they're not advertising to me. They're not advertising to us. They are advertising to a particular idea. And the advertising industry has not been covering itself in glory in recent years. One just has to look at things like the Rolls-Royce advert that blew up its sales.
If I'm seeing an advert for Sainsbury's sort of advertising to me, I don't know, tin tomatoes or something. Why does it matter? Why does it matter if the person, the face that I'm seeing in front of me is black, white or brown?
It doesn't matter qua matter, but the presentation is a very different presentation from the actual reality of life. In certain parts of the country, it's much more accurate, but in large swathes of the country, swathes that the London bubble and the advertising bubble doesn't seem to recognize, it doesn't look like that. It isn't like that. It's an inaccurate description of our country. Now, as I say, the advertising industry has every right to do whatever it wants. That's just how it is. But I do think, as I say, I just groan a bit inwardly. Oh, look, another historical, in drama, another historical figure being portrayed as X, Y, or Z. The Pankhurst sisters, for example. We know it's bunk. We know it's rubbish. We know it's rot historically. However, if that's how they want to do it, meh. It's not something I personally lose sleep over.
Would you accept what Wes Streeting has said this morning, and indeed what Chris Philp said, which is that her views, as expressed, were racist?
No, I don't think they were racist. She was raging against the inaccuracy. That's all. It was not particularly brilliantly described, but the point is real. There is a massive difference between the country that is portrayed on our screens and the country that we live in. And that's
about 20%. Well, it's about 20% of the UK's population is of an ethnic minority. It probably wouldn't be completely unreasonable that the advertising industry reflected that on our screens and in our newspapers and in wherever they chose to advertise. Is it?
I agree, but you say 20%, yet 50% of adverts carry people of ethnic minorities. So
it's such a bad thing to allow people to feel included in the country in which they live. What's the problem? What's the problem?
It's not a question of inclusion. It's a question, to a certain extent, of the advertising industry's desire to impose a vision that is not accurate.
Okay, well, if you're so interested in accuracy, if you're so interested in accuracy, Gawain, as a member of the party board, and you're so interested in the accurate representation of different ethnicities and so on in wherever you happen to see, why wouldn't you have quotas for a party like yours in terms of Parliament?
Because quotas are nuts. And as I say, there's nothing a government can do about the advertising industry.
No, I mean quotas, for example, in the number for your MPs or for your party board of how many ethnic minorities. Because if accuracy is so important, why not?
Quotas are nuts, Lewis. They are in themselves racist and debilitating. They damage both the talented and the less talented. It is a very bad thing. When we see quotas for employment in government services that restrict things to particular ethnicities, It's never the white ethnicity, is it? It's never the poor white people who are given a chance. So I'm sorry, the way that quotas are done is wrong. But as I say, I wouldn't impose quotas, and you cannot tell the advertising or film industry and TV industry how to do its job.
Do you understand, do you understand why, if you're a young black person, a young Asian person, and you're hearing a parliamentarian saying it drives me mad when I see adverts full of black people, full of Asian people, that you'd find that really chilling? And maybe your MPs maybe should be a bit more careful about how they word.
I would agree. The language could have been better. The point she was making was not chilling. It is reasonable. However, the language could have been better. There's no doubt about that.
Gawain Tola there.
So this is really interesting because when Goodall brings up Sarah Poton's comments about being driven mad by seeing too many black and Asian people in adverts, Towler doesn't exactly throw her under the bus. He just says that her wording was a little bit wrong, but the overall sentiment he actually agrees with. So his argument is that there's too many ethnic minorities in adverts compared to the actual population. And he comes out with these statistics, right? About 4% of the population being black and 50% of the adverts featuring black people. But what I found like absolutely incredible, right, is he's saying that there are too many non-white people in adverts and they don't represent how few there are within the country. But I thought Reform's whole stance was that there's too many immigrants, too many non-white faces. But then on the complete other side of it, he's saying that these adverts aren't actually representative of the UK population. So I think he kind of does have to pick a lane here. And it kind of goes against Reform's whole thing about there being too many non-white people in the country. And looking at the big picture here, what really comes through in this interview is Reform's ongoing identity crisis. They desperately want to be seen as a legitimate mainstream political party, but they keep getting tripped up by comments that sound like they were lifted from a 1970s working men's club. And Towler's trying his best to make it all sound reasonable and measured, but you can't really put up a respectable spin on being upset about diversity in television adverts, especially the way Sarah said that as well. So I think, Towler just showed up trying to defend the indefensible, which again is a lot of what these people kind of have to try and do. But watching him trying to explain why caring about ethnic representation in adverts isn't racist, while insisting that caring about ethnic representation in politics definitely is racist, is just a complete contradiction in itself. And the whole thing just left me wondering, like, in a country dealing with actual problems like the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, and other issues in society, how are we ending up with politicians whose biggest concern is apparently that there's too many brown people selling breakfast cereal? It's just political chaos at its finest. And frankly, I think we deserve a bit better from our politicians. But let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.